And there are ways around that. There are ways of negotiating that. There's ways of, for example, where the extrovert and introvert can say, okay, let's go to this party, but we're going to take 2 cars. And the implicit agreement between them is, you want to stay, you stay. When I'm tired and my energy's depleted because I've been interacting with other people, I'll go home. I still love you, no problem. I'm not mad, let's do it. And so those are the kind of accommodations that people can make to their different personality types once they understand that, which I think is one of the big values of knowing type in a relationship.
Hello, my name is Donald and welcome to WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Do people say you don't have a personality? Well, our next guest is going to help sort that out. Paul T. Tieger is the founder and CEO of SpeedReading People. He is an internationally recognized expert on and the author of 5 breakthrough books about personality type, including The Art of SpeedReading People, Nurture by Nature, Just Your Type, and one of the most popular career books of all time, Do What You Are, the first to recognize the key role that personality type plays in career satisfaction and success. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Donald. I'm very delighted to be here with you.
So, Paul, I'm a big fan of your work. I mean, I've got Do What You Are right next to me. I'd show it to you, but the virtual screen is going to screw that up. But to our viewers, can you tell us, what is this Myers-Briggs? How did it originate? What is Myers-Briggs?
Sure. Well, the world knows Myers-Briggs from the assessment called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Some people call it or refer to it as the MBTI. And I really refer to it as the Jung-Myers model of personality type. And why? Because Carl Jung is really the author of the theory of personality type. Started in 1921. He wrote a book on psychological types. In 1923, a woman named Catherine Briggs, who lived in Pennsylvania, read it, and she goes, she's been working on her own model of personality for a long time. When she read Jung's work, she went, wow, this guy's got it going on here. She interested her then young daughter, Isabel Briggs, in this pursuit. Long story, but Isabel, bona fide genius. And it became Isabel's life work to create an assessment that would access Jung's theories. And that's why, hence the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, Myers for her name, Briggs to recognize her mother's contribution. But I really think of this as a Jung-Myers model.
But I mean, the idea of personality types go, I believe, all the way back to like Socrates, who said, Socrates, okay, that's probably the correct way to say that. Right. Socrates said that rationals should be the governors of a republic. He was the first to coin the idea of a rational republic. But I mean, the idea of personality types is quite historic. It goes back quite a while.
Right. I'm differentiating between what I think you're calling temperaments and personality type. So personality type theory is more modern. Again, since probably since the 70s, it's been used extensively because of the Myers-Briggs, because of the assessment, the ability to have this, because the ability to type people. And there were 16 different types. When Socrates was talking about this in 450 BC, excuse me, Hippocrates in 450 BC, he wasn't talking about ENFJs or INFPs or any of those things. He was talking about temperaments, which I'd be happy to talk to you about, which is really the work of a guy named David Keirsey. When he was understanding and studying personality, he looked back and saw from 450 BC on through different cultures, different periods of time, philosophers, later on psychologists. They tend to look at people and saw 4 different types of people or 4 different groups of people. Native Americans have 4 different spirit keepers. Hindu wisdom has 4 different central desires, on and on and on. So I am a person who believes that temperament is really the core of a person's personality type. So there's 4 different temperaments, and there's 16 different personality types, and there are 4 temperaments that the 4 types that go with each of those 4 temperaments.
And on that note, can you tell us what are those 4 temperaments? Because I believe if we go through 16 personality types, that's going to take forever. So the 4 temperaments.
Sure. Well, in my books, I refer to them as traditionalists, and I'll explain this in a second, experiencers, conceptualizers, and idealists. And traditionalists are people who are, in the Myers-Briggs world, people who are both sensing and judging. So any one of the 4 types that are sensing judging types, like ESTJ or ISTJ, are called traditionalists. And traditionalists are really about responsibility, duty, service, doing the right thing, playing by the rules, following authority, and they're about 46% of the population of the world. So the world is really a very traditionalist place, and that's why we've got a lot of traditional values. The second group, which I call experiencers, are people who combine sensing, which is realism and down-to-earthness, with perceiving, which is open, spontaneous, curiosity. So sensing perceivers or experiencers are very different. They're all about enjoying the moment, living for today, taking risks, not necessarily worrying about the future. And they're about 27% of the population. Okay, so we've got traditionalists, steady Eddie, solid, dependable, reliable, do the right thing. You got the people that like to have a good time, enjoy their life, are more adventurous, risk-taking, which are the experiencers. The next group are called conceptualizers. And those are people who are both intuitive, meaning they like big picture possibilities, theories, strategies combined with logic, and that makes them very competency driven. They're lifelong learners. They're interested in a lot of things. They collect a lot of degrees. They're people who are intellectually, they love to be intellectually challenged, great creative problem solvers, and those are the conceptualizers. And they're only about 10% of the population, but they really rule the world, because those 10%, if I showed you data on people who are CEOs, CFOs, COOs, people that really run corporations, governments, might be 70 or 80% of those people are conceptualizers when they're only 10% of the population. And I know that you're one of those people, so I think you relate to those.
You're flattering me.
Well, here you are. You're the guy that's created this program, I assume, and you're running the program, and you're doing a lot of things to share your wisdom and other people's wisdom with the world. So it's a great thing for a visionary like you to be doing. And it's consistent with personality type, and in this case, temperament.
Great, thank you. And an idealist?
An idealist are people who combine intuition, big picture possibilities, with values. So feeling is really not about emotion as much as it's values, what's important to me and to other people. So these folks are real, I call them idealists because they are the most idealistic people. They're all about relationships, meaning, understanding, helping people grow, develop, empathy. So a core drive for them is empathy and understanding people. And they're about 17% of the population. But if I showed you data on counselors, therapists, psychologists, professors of literature, you'd see there might be 80% of those people are idealists. So people really gravitate towards occupations and interests based on their personality type. And if they've got a good handle on that, which we hope to help a lot of people through Do What You Are understand that, they find themselves in a fulfilling occupation.
And I think we can talk forever about every single letter of those personality types. But one thing that's probably the most important to most people is the introvert versus extrovert, that letter, the introversion versus the extroversion. And there's a common conception amongst people that extroverts are good at public speaking, they are the socializers, whilst the introverts are not. Is that a true mindset? Is that realistic?
Well, first of all, good question, but I want to point out that with the temperaments, extroversion and introversion is not part of the temperaments, but it is part of personality type, right? And you're right, it's an important thing. And it's important. I don't think it's the most important, but it's a thing that is most common to people. And that's also a term that Carl Jung coined, right? It's not from Isabel Myers, is the idea of extroversion and introversion is straight out of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung said that some people are more focused in the outer world of people and things, and some people are more internally focused. So the extroverts are more externally focused, the introverts more internally focused. So when it comes to public speaking, extroverts are more attracted to being with people. The extroversion introversion thing really is about energy. So extroverts get energy from being with other people. It comes into them. Introverts are much more self-contained and self-reliant, and their energy comes from within. So extroverts are drawn to talk to people, to people. And the other big difference is that the way that extroverts and introverts process information, if you don't know what an extrovert's talking, you haven't been listening, because we'll tell you. If you don't know what an introvert's thinking, you haven't asked the question and waited long enough for an answer. So extroverts do their best work out here. If you say, Paul, tell me about this, I'll say, oh, tell you about that? Okay, well, let me think. And you can actually see me thinking out loud. You can hear me thinking out loud. But if you ask an introvert a question, there'll almost always be a pause when they go inside to their favorite world to think that out. So more words come out of extroverts than they do introverts. And I think that in general, there's more facility to be a public speaker, but that doesn't mean that introverts can't be public speakers. But if I showed you, let me just finish this one thought.
Sure.
If I showed you, if we took 100 people who are public speakers, probably 80% of them are going to be extroverts. But doesn't mean that 20%, other 20% aren't fabulous or the best public speakers that ever lived.
And you could probably say because an extrovert gets his energy from public speaking and he's more drawn to speaking, he gets more experience, and thus he will be better at public speaking. So if the introvert just fights that and gets himself out more, he will get better at public speaking. It's sort of just he has to fight the tendency.
Well, I think we all stretch. The growth comes from stretching. It doesn't mean type doesn't mean somebody can't do something. It means it's not their natural preference, right? So I think of every personality type preference. Everybody is primarily one side or the other, extrovert, introvert, but not exclusively. And some people have got more facility, more access to the other side. Some people don't have much access, but it is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get at it. I agree with you about that.
But I mean, for some introverts, I believe in your book, Do What You Are, you recommend that, let us say introverts, you recommend that they become a professor. And doesn't a professor talk a lot to a public audience?
No, I don't. Well, first of all, I don't recommend that they become a professor. We say that a lot of professors are introverts. But that's really less about public speaking than it is about becoming a subject matter expert. If you're a professor in the States, you pretty much have to have a PhD. If you have a PhD, you've got to study something very, very in depth, which raises a good point, Donald. The gift of extroversion is breadth. We extroverts are interested in a lot of things, but we don't go too deep. The gift of introversion is depth. So if I am a person who has the focus and the discipline to study something really in depth, anthropology, psychology, whatever, and then do my research, and then do my dissertation, and then defend my dissertation, then that's more where the introversion comes in from than from dealing with students. A lot of professors are not very good teachers. They're good, they're good scholars, right? There's always a tension, or in the States anyway, there's a tension between scholarship and teaching effectiveness, right? And they're often different. I don't mean that introverts can't be effective teachers, but I'm saying that the teachers that are usually the most popular, the ones that kids like to be around, they're more extroverted than introverted, right? The teachers that are the real scholars that do more of the publishing, that become more the expert, in general, they tend to be more the introverts than extroverts.
On that note, can you tell us what are the advantages and disadvantages of being an introvert and an extrovert?
Well, I think that the advantage for being extroverts is extroverts are more comfortable in the world, so they see more opportunities and they go make things happen. They're more likely to. as a class, not individuals. When I'm talking about extroverts or introverts, I'm talking about as a group, right? So not every individual is a unique person. So they're much more in tune with what's going on in the world. They tend to have a faster pace. So they like to go from this to this. So they might be more interested in a variety of things. They might have a wider circle of friendships, right? Extroverts tend to have a lot more friends or acquaintances or associates than introverts do, whereas introverts might have fewer people, but they're more deep friendships. Introverts are more selective. So they might be people who, as I said before, are able to dive deeper, develop a deeper expertise, which is an advantage to being an introvert. They're often people that others listen to, because extroverts say a lot of things. But when an introvert says something, it's like, I thought that out. Let me, there must be something there. So introverts can have a lot of positional power because of just by virtue of the fact that they don't say a lot. So those are some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages.
So I like to imagine a sort of a portrait where an extrovert goes from one to many, and whereas an introvert goes from many to one. Extrovert likes to create a lot of ideas from one idea, and an introvert likes to take a lot of ideas and quantify it into one single idea. Would that be an accurate representation?
Donald, I never thought about it that way, but that's okay, because you've got that big brain that thinks of things differently the way I do. And I think that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
And I've also read this book, Speedreading People, and I found this fascinating. Can you tell us how can you speed read someone and determine his type?
Okay, I define speed reading, and let me say that I was a jury consultant for 25 years. So I don't know what they do where you are, but in the States, jury consultants, we have jury trials. And so it's the job of people like me to participate in the interviewing of prospective jurors and to advise the attorney, this person maybe would be good, this person wouldn't be good, because people come into situations with predispositions, preconceived notions that can influence a trial before they even hear any evidence. So it's a pretty powerful thing. So the reason I mentioned this is because I had to come up with a system for quickly understanding who somebody is, and I call that speed reading people. It's based on observable clues, and there are a lot of clues. There is language. People speak differently. Extroverts speak more and they speak faster, usually, than introverts. So on a stand, if my attorney would ask a question, as I said before, the introvert would almost always pause. So I'm going, okay, good clue, not solid, but good clue that person's an introvert. One of many clues. People that are sensing types, we didn't talk too much about that, but sensing types who like the facts and details will give all the specifics. So I said, so what's a typical day like for you? The attorney might ask the question. Well, I get up at 7:15. I have 2 eggs and bacon. I make them in my new kitchen. The kitchen's got this new granite counter. All the specifics, all the details. Then at 7:15, I go do this. At 9 o'clock, I take my first break. At 9:15, all those kind of, if I'm hearing all those facts, I'm hearing sensing clues, as opposed to intuitives that are much more general and more broad. So that's a clue for sensing intuition. Thinking and feeling clues. Thinking types are much more kind of logical in the way they present and analytical in the way they present information. They usually don't talk about things that are personal to them. On the other hand, feeling types are more likely to talk about their kids, their feelings about things, and they use value words, which is a great clue, which is, I loved it, I hate it, it's terrible, it's wonderful, it's fabulous. Those are words that reflect their values. So what's inside comes out of their mouths. Thinking types don't do that. They go, well, number 1, number 2, number 3, but it's not a personal value.
They try to be objective.
Yes, they are objective. They're a lot more objective. So when I say to people, when I have the question is, what's important to you in the world? Those are very good clues as well. Issues that come out of somebody's values. Some people are much more judging, organized and planful, And you can see clues in terms of the way they dress, the way their demeanor. Are they more serious? Are they more casual? The person who sits there like this and is very attentive and answers all the questions and leans forward often is a traditionalist, which we talked about before. Person who's leaning back and kind of shifting around their chair, and they're kind of just have a more casual demeanor, are much more likely to be those experiencer types, that temperament. So there are a plethora of clues.
I know this might be a bit biased, but I have a personal theory as well. Don't experiences or Ps, don't they usually also have a better sense of humor?
It's not a bad theory. I think that judging types are much more serious in life than perceiving types. Yes. And I think that, I've done a lot of research, but I haven't done any research on that, scientific research on that particular issue. But anecdotally, after doing this for 40 years, I would say yes.
But yeah, but you can definitely see most comedians, they're almost always, because you have to be spontaneous, and that's usually associated with an experiencer or a P.
Well, comedians are a little different breed, because you're hearing for most comedians, you're hearing a very, very honed, practiced routine. I mean, there aren't a lot of guys that get up there and just make it up. It doesn't work that way for a comedian. When you see people, though, when they're interviewed like on a talk show, like a Robin Williams, for example, right? I mean, there's no doubt that Robin Williams was a perceiving type.
A massive one.
Well, a massive one, an off the scale one. I mean, the kind we may never see again, right? But he was an anomaly in terms of that. He's huge. But a lot of people are much more controlled, but they've got a great sense of humor. They know it's funny. And a sense of humor, I don't think is something you can be taught. It's something you're born with. But in general, I would agree with you that people that like to laugh, that laugh easily, that like to tell jokes or see humor in things, they're more likely to be Ps, perceiving types, than Js, judging types.
So Paul, in your book, Speedreading People, you also mention, now that you've identified a type, you also give guidelines. How do you speak to that type? Can you give our viewers some idea? How do you speak to a type once you've identified it?
Sure. Well, I call this speed reaching people. So there's speed reading people, figuring out who they are, and speed reaching people, getting on their wavelength. And Donald, what I would say is everyone wants other people to be like them. We might not know that. If I ask that question, people might say, never thought about it. But it's true. Most people want other people to be like them, and we are most comfortable with people who are like us. So that's number one. Number two, we all know the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. But in communication, it really has to be do unto others as they would have done unto them. It's not about us anymore. It's about the other person. So if you were talking to somebody who's hard of hearing, if you're smart about it, you speak slower, you might speak louder, you might not put your hand in front of your face because they might be looking for clues. If you're talking to a child, if you were smart, you'd get on one knee so you get eye level. You wouldn't use a bunch of big words that they didn't understand. You'd be speaking their language. If you went to France and you knew how to speak French, you'd speak French. So it's the same thing when you're speed reaching people by personality. If you can understand, if you can speed read them, and you know, for example, that a person is a sensing type, they're going to want all the details. So if I'm talking to you and they say, well, what about this product? Why should I buy it? Well, first of all, you should buy it because this research has shown that it's 89% effective. We've done these studies, firsthand experience. I've used this product. I mean, all the specifics, the facts, the details, because that's what's going to be important to this person. So if you can understand what's important to them and deliver that, they're more likely to say, sign me up. On the other hand, if you're talking to an intuitive, a big intuitive, big idea person, and if you overwhelm them with too many details, you can just see their eyes close and they get exhausted, and you've tuned them, they've tuned you out. So that's one way. If you're talking to a feeling type, it's important to take the time to establish a relationship, because we feeling types make decisions based on whether we like it or not. If I like you, I'm much more likely to buy what you're selling me, or go along with your idea. If I don't like you, if you piss me off, then, excuse my language, then I'm less likely to be engaged. So it's really about speed reaching people is getting on their wavelength and speaking their language.
But also you recommend, I believe, that when you speak to feeling types, the first thing you should do is, especially if you disagree with someone, the first thing you should do is you should say how you agree with someone. And then from that, you move on to how you disagree with someone. It's important to start the conversation always with what is that, even if it's a small point, what do you agree with? What do you think is...
I'm sorry. I think that's true. I think the reality is that feeling types do not like conflict. They don't like to argue. They don't like to debate. Thinking types, especially intuitive thinking types, love to debate. They love to argue. They don't do it to be a pain in the butt. They do it because that's how they learn. And then if you give them a good logical argument, they'll go, okay, makes sense. But that's fun for them. It's no fun for feeling types. So, and feeling types like to be appreciated. They like to be appreciated for their good ideas. So let's say you're a feeling type and I'm a thinking type, and you presented this idea and there's some things in it that don't make any sense to me. I might say to you, Donald, I really thought that was a good point you made here. And I'd like to expand on it a little bit, but I also have some other thoughts. Would you be open to hearing them? Well, now I'm inviting your participation, and I'm not saying you're a jerk because of what you said, right?
And can't one argue that it's actually, well, it's a difficult argument to make, but can't one say that it's actually the most difficult to sell something to a feeling type because you have to personally connect with that person?
No, I don't think so at all. I think sometimes it's very easy to sell to a feeling type because they want to please you. A feeling types as a salesperson and as a consumer the salesperson is, how can I help you? It makes me feel good. We all do things that make us feel good. It makes feeling types feel good when we help somebody. So we want to help them. And as consumers, it's the same thing. I want to please the salesperson. I want, one of the problems with that feeling types have is we can confuse friendliness with friendship. Is this person really our friend just because they're being nice to us? We want them to be our friend. So we might not, really criticize or scrutinize what it is they're selling us or how they're behaving. So no, I don't think it's harder to sell to a feeling type at all. I think it's how you sell to a feeling type. In fact, I think thinking types are much more critical and scrutinize things much more carefully because they don't care about pleasing you. They want to get the best deal.
Yeah. So actually, for a typical salesman, it's better to sell to a feeling type because they will fall for a typical salesman pitch if they do it very well. But a thinking type will see through it, right? They don't fall for the charisma. They will look at the details.
They scrutinize things much more carefully in general. They're much more critical. They're much more likely to push back, and that's something that feeling types do not do. They don't push back often, right? So if you got thinking type, sales guy, thinking type, consumer, especially intuitive thinking, they can really bang things around. But at the end of the day, if this makes sense, logical sense to buy this, I'm going to buy it. I don't have to like you. I don't like your company. I don't even like what your company's doing. But this car is the right car for me. It's a good enough deal. You got a good warranty. Sign me up.
If we can pivot to,
sure.
I know it's a quite a topic of discussion in my family, and that is the idea that opposites attract, right? Yep. Especially in a partnership, especially in a marriage, opposites are the way to go. Is that true in a personality type, that you should seek someone that is quite the opposite to what you are?
It's a great question. I get it a lot, and here's what I got to say. First of all, one of the books I wrote is called Just Your Type, which is all about couples. So my partner and I interviewed hundreds of couples, and we looked at the things, their personality types. We looked at the issues they had. We looked at the things that worked for them, the challenges they had, and the joys and challenges of that pair. And I believe that opposites do attract, but that doesn't mean they make the best couples. So when I said before that everyone wants other people to be like them, we do, and we surround ourselves with people like us, but not when it comes to spouses. When there's hormones involved, it's a whole different story, right? So just because opposite, and here's the reason why I think opposites attract, because we see something in somebody else and we go, you know, that's a really nice quality. Unconsciously, I wish I was more like that. If I'm with that person, I'll be more like that, right? So, and the extrovert looks at the introvert and says, you know, she's so grounded, she's so self-contained, she can sit in a room by herself and read a book. She's thoughtful, she's focused. I wish I was more like that. Okay. The introvert looks at the extrovert and says, he's so social. He's so comfortable with people. He's got so many friends. He has so much fun. If I was with him, I would be more like that. Let's get together. Okay, now they get together. So now it's time to go out on a Friday night. And the extrovert says, let's go. And the introvert says, what are you talking about? He says, yeah, let's go. There's a party. There's a pub down there. And there's a lot of friends. And we'll have a great time. And the introvert says, I really kind of would like to just spend the night here with you. You know, we could read to each other. We can watch television. We can just spend the time together, right? Now, what's happened is they both are who they are, but there's a combination that often has to happen. And there are ways around that. There are ways of negotiating that. There's ways of, for example, where the extrovert and introvert can say, okay, let's go to this party, but we're going to take 2 cars. And the implicit agreement between them is, you want to stay, you stay. When I'm tired and my energy's depleted because I've been interacting with other people, I'll go home. I still love you, no problem. I'm not mad, let's do it. And so those are the kind of accommodations that people can make to their different personality types once they understand that, which I think is one of the big values of knowing type in a relationship.
And I believe you say in your books that the most important letter is the second one, the N and the S, in determining if you fit each other, right? Because I mean, I believe if the other one is an S and you are an N, that usually doesn't work. The other letters can be different, but an S and an N, because they view the world in such a different view, they usually don't. They struggle to communicate with each other.
Okay, so let me say something about that. You're right, and the S stands for sensing. And sensing are people who kind of are practical, realistic, take in information through their 5 senses. So they got a very realistic view of the world. But intuitives use their 6th sense. Intuitives look at something and say, how is that related to this? How can it be different? How can it be improved? What's the big picture? What is the meaning behind it? So it's I do think that sensing intuition is the most important of the dimensions in relationships. But that doesn't mean that sensing types and intuitives can't have good relationships. But in my research for just your type, I learned that among all the issues, the most important issue for couples is communication. And sensing intuition poses, in my judgment, the biggest challenges for communication because they often miss each other. You know, the intuitive's talking up here, the sensing type says, what are you talking about? I don't follow you. The sensing type's doing this, and the intuitive type says, well, how does that connect to this? We're not talking about, you know, this, we're talking about this. So I love the quote from a psychologist named Virginia Satir, who said, we meet at the level of our similarities, but we grow at the level of our differences. So what that says to me is people of all types, and I know this from my own experience and from my research and living for as many years as I have, that all people can have a different be different, but have a great relationship. But type creates challenges, but also opportunities to grow.
And also, if you're an introvert, being with an extrovert, doesn't that also help you to grow? Because I believe in your books as well, you make the point that your extroverted side, your second best side, if you're an introvert, is usually the way how you mature, how you grow, and you need someone to pull you into that direction, and vice versa. If you're an extrovert, you need someone to pull you into the introvert area. So being with someone that's the opposite of you in terms of the first letter, that that matures you, that helps you to grow.
I agree. Well, I agree with me because I said it, right? But thank you for pointing it out and reminding me. I haven't looked at that book for a long time, but yes, it's true. The other thing is that, you know, one of the quotes that's got nothing to do with personality, well, it does have to do with personality type, that I really like is, the purpose of life is to grow. The purpose of relationships is to show us where we need to grow, right? So the reality is that our partners often are the ones who can help us develop and grow. But there's another piece to personality type which really plays into that, and that is that this is a developmental model. Now, as Jung said that as we go through life, we work on different parts of our personality. And when we reach midlife, we start to unconsciously want wholeness, because we know this journey is not going to go forever. And the wholeness comes from using the part of our personality that we haven't used in the first half. So in other words, everyone's got the ability, you know, an introverted side, an extroverted side, but everyone's got sort of a natural preference. But just because I'm an extrovert doesn't mean I'm a complete extrovert, right? There's times when I can sit home, prefer to sit home, read a book, be by myself, think about something deeply, etc. So the reality is that when I reach a certain part of my life, all of a sudden I realize that I'm more interested in this than I was before. Sensing intuition is a great example. A lot of times when people get to this midlife point that are intuitives, all of a sudden they start to plug into their sensing side, and they start gardening, cooking, getting into nature, doing things that they never really were driven to or attracted to in the first half of their life. And that's all about the wholeness that we now find by developing that other side. So it's both, you're right, it's about people bringing us out into the situation, out into a new way of looking at things. And it's also about our ability to stretch and develop.
And yeah, that's fascinating. And Paul, if we can move it to a more serious note, do you believe that most marriages fail because they don't understand these personality types? They don't understand how to figure out a person that suits them, right? They are more guided by, to be crass, by sexual attraction rather than looking at if this person is someone that I can spend my life with. This is a person that correlates with my personality type.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. You know, there's a lot there. First of all, I think that the sexual piece becomes much less important as you get older. So, you know, if somebody's been married for 30 years, it's not the same thing as been married for, you know, a year. It's just not the same thing for most people. So, yeah, there are people who are married for 30 years who get divorced. So it's not the sexual piece that's really the issue. Marriage is a complicated arrangement. I think everyone would agree to that. And there are a lot of pieces to it. So I will say that the more you know yourself, the better you know yourself and your needs, and the better you understand your spouse and his or her needs, the better shot you've got at negotiating and all these different things. It's about accepting that person is different. You're really going to be that way? Wait a minute. I like that when we were recording, but you're really going to be that way? Well, yes, I really am that way. So now there's accommodations that have to be made. And I think that there was a quote in Just Your Type. Actually, let me read this because it's really good. It's just one line. It's the
sure.
The opening quote, which says, "If you don't like someone, the way he holds his spoon will make you furious. If you do like him, he can turn his plate over into your lap and you won't mind." Okay, so it's really all about the liking, meaning tolerating and appreciating the differences. I've been in enough relationships to know that some of my personality characteristics have driven my partner nuts and vice versa. But it's when I get to the point where I go, you know, you've got something I don't have that I need, that marriage or that relationship becomes much richer, and we start to really give each other more of what we need in life.
So it's not necessarily about types or psychology. It's just accepting who the other person is. That's probably what you would say is the main obstacle to having a successful marriage.
I think it is. And I think that the reality is personality type comes in because it's a great way of understanding who that person is. You know, you're not doing that just to be a pain in the neck. You're doing that because that's who you are. And if there's so many other things I love about you, you know, I can put up with the fact that you're sloppy. You're never going to have, you know, things in exactly the same order that I do. But if I'm the person who's kind of sloppy, I can stretch a little bit too and close the closet door, which I've done for certain people. I just need that door closed. Okay, how big an ask is that? I'm going to close the door. It's just not that big a thing. And so I think that as people, you know, as their love deepens and love changes and grows more full, they're willing to do more things for their partner, and type helps them understand what it is they want and why it is they want it.
So yeah, I love that concept. Type is really just a way of understanding your partner, but if you just took the effort, it can work, right? You just need to take that effort. But I mean, if I can pivot to a personal idea I have, and that is that rationals aren't really okay. More broadly speaking, is romance and marriage for all personality types? Because I mean, I recently read a biography or an autobiography, I don't know which it is, of Steve Jobs, and I'm pretty much convinced he was irrational. And during that biography, he fell in love a couple of times, but his wife repeatedly said it lasted for a few days and then he went off again. In his business concepts or ideas, he became detached. And I feel that's quite a trait of a rational. They fail to stick to romance or to a partnership. They are just too invested in their work if they love their work. So is romance and marriage something for every personality type?
Okay, well, first of all, I think you should define what you mean by rational, because it's a term that some books use, some don't. Are you thinking
a conceptual of the concept? I can't remember what. Yeah.
An intuitive thinking type, right? So I don't want to confuse your viewers or your listeners about this. So you're asking is people who are conceptualizers, in my language, intuitive thinking type, big idea people, they're interested in strategy, they're often very career focused, right? Relationships are usually not the most important thing to them. So that's where you're coming from. Are you saying, is marriage not right for them? I can't make that kind of statement because I think most human beings want to be coupled. That's how our nature is. But there are a lot of people who are much more independent than others. You know, an intuitive feeling type, for example, like me, live for relationships. We thrive on relationships. They're like air. We need them in order to breathe, right? Whereas intuitive thinking types, conceptualizers, often don't have the same need. But does that mean they shouldn't get married? There are a lot of, people need different things. In other words, you can have two conceptualizers. An example might be Bill and Hillary Clinton that I think are both conceptualizers, right? And what might be the most appealing thing about them is their intellect and the way they see the world. And I'm just speculating here because I don't know them personally, but two people who are intellectual, that might be the basis of their relationship.
They have a bit of a House of Cards relationship.
Yeah, okay, House of Cards, right, with Claire and whatever his name was, I forgot, Kevin Spacey's character. Frank Underwood, right, exactly. And I mean, they're caricatures, but for purpose of illustration, yeah, they're totally up here, strategic, in their head. It's all about the advantage, and doesn't mean that, by the way, all conceptualizers are morally bankrupt like those people were. But yeah, that was almost a marriage of convenience because they fed off. Other people need intimacy. Other people need, to a partner who likes to hike because they love to hike. Other people need a partner who loves the opera because that's their passion in life. And if I loved opera and I live for opera and my partner couldn't care less about it, it could be a problem because I want to share that with my partner and she's got no interest in it. So it's not a simple thing. So I'm not prepared to say that conceptualizers as a class, as a group, don't want to be married, but I think that they look for different things.
Yeah, and I don't want to be obsessed with this, but it almost sounds like I'm giving marriage, or I'm asking marriage advice for myself. But just for context, because I went this way, if Steve Jobs now, for example, wanted his marriage to be successful, he might have wanted to go for someone that's also in his line of work or something like that. For example, comparison with a traditionalist, you want someone with your values. That's essentially what it always boils down to. You want someone that shares your values. Then you can make the marriage or the relationship work.
Well, I think you're looking for an absolute you're not going to get from me. But the best I can do is to say to you that different things are more important to different types. And so if something's very important to me, if religion is really important to me, if I'm a fundamentalist, I'm not going to be happy with an atheist. It's just not going to work because we don't believe in the same thing. And especially, I will add this, Donald, when you become a parent, that becomes like gasoline on the fire. It accelerates everything. If my values, again, are religious values, and I want my children to have those values, and my spouse couldn't care less, that's a natural place for a conflict. If a person is obsessed with money and accumulation, and their spouse is someone who just doesn't care about money, cares about a nurturing home life or whatever it is. So I think people are different. Personality type is a great way of helping them understand their differences, to explore their differences before they, make a decision. How important really is this? How important is this to you? And if you can understand that and communicate, that's the gift of personality type, I believe, in relationships.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And on a last note, I know you are currently working on anxiety and depression, how that connects with personality types. Can you tell us the research that you've done on that? Because that sounds incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, I really said, personality type, it's fine to help people communicate and couples and parents, but it's really connected, I believe, to health and disease. And so I did a lot of research. I've hooked up with some of the leading researchers in the world, actually. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in their research. So did a study with 16,700 people, which is a lot of people. They all took my assessment, which is very accurate. And the first thing we looked at was medication adherence. Who are the people who do what they're supposed to do, take the medication, which keeps them healthy, and who are the people that don't? And in general, about 50% of the people that are supposed to be taking medication take it. So that's a lot that don't. And what we found, no surprise, is the traditionalists, the sensing judging types, they do just what they're supposed to do. Doctor tells them to do it, they do it. They follow the rules, they respect the authority of the white coat, etc.
And sorry, also on that note, isn't opiates quite a problem in the United States?
Huge problem. Let me get to that in a second, though, because opiates is different. But the experiencers were the ones who were the big problem children in medication adherence, because I'm kind of more casual. Maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't take it. They don't go to doctors the way in the same numbers traditionalists do. They skip appointments often. They don't worry about the present. They don't worry about the future because they're too busy enjoying the present. So there was a big connection there. So then we went on to do other studies about risk factors like smoking, alcohol use, exercise, weight, stress, anxiety, depression, and we found huge correlations between personality type and all of those risk factors. The ones you were talking specifically about anxiety and depression, we found that it's the intuitive feeling types, the idealists, who are at much greater risk. So whereas a traditionalist is like an introvert, sensing, thinking, judging type, an ISTJ, which is one type, they might be 36% less likely to develop anxiety or depression. An INFP, introvert, intuitive, feeling, perceiving type, is 86% more likely. So this was the first study that showed this kind of stuff, a big study. There was 10,000 500 people in a study, it showed very clearly a strong relationship between personality type and anxiety and depression.
And why do you think that is, especially focused on idealists?
Sure. Well, because intuitive feeling types, we've got this imagination, right? We look at the world, and because we're feeling types, we see things, we feel things very deeply, and we see things the way they should be, and they seldom are, right? So we're empaths. We're very sensitive folks. So we worry about stuff that other people don't worry about. We're concerned about how people feel. We're concerned about global issues. And so we are people that are really prone to anxiety and depression. That's the main reason why.
That's fascinating. And are you writing a book on this topic?
I'm not writing a book on that, but I've done a lot of research, and I've created the whole program called iConnect Health, which you can look up on iconnecthealth.com, which is all about how to use personality type to help, not only to help understand risk factors, but to help providers to understand how to communicate with patients. Because what engages a traditionalist is very different than what engages an experiencer. And it's very important to engage people and to develop trusting relationships in order to gain adherence, so people will do the right things so they can reduce chronic illness.
Mm. And what advice would you give to someone, an idealist, that has problems with these issues? How do you handle such a situation?
Well, the first thing I think is to say that you're not alone. Yes, you do feel things deeply, but idealists are most likely to go to therapists, which they should do because they need the help, and they're also most likely to become therapists. So if I showed you a type table, type data of therapists, idealists are only 17% of the population, but they might be 70 or 80% of psychologists. There's a reason why, because we're wired to want to understand people and understand why we're doing and to help people. So it's very gratifying for a therapist to sit there and go, Donald, tell me what's going on with you. Let me figure out how that fits into the way you were raised, your circumstances, your personality, and how can I help you to become happier and more fulfilled? That's what the job of a therapist is. And that's why intuitive feeling types are such, they're so commonly found in that occupation.
Mm. Well, yeah, that's very interesting, Paul. And thank you so much for your time. I don't want to spend any more of your valuable time. And yeah, this has been a fascinating conversation. I absolutely loved it. I want to give you one last opportunity to add, plug, or say anything that you want to.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Donald. It was a great opportunity. And, you know, I love to talk about this, obviously, because it's been a passion of mine for, you know, it's been my life's work for the last 40 years. So clearly I believe in it. And I think the reality is that, you know, all the books that I've written, they're all available on Amazon. They're books that deal with different things and have a very practical focus. It's not theory. It's not something that's hard to understand. It's how to parent your children by understanding who they are better. It's how to understand your spouse and how to communicate better with that person. It's how to understand your boss and the people that are important to you. And it's how to find a career that is going to make use of your best natural gifts so that you can be more satisfied and successful. So again, I welcome the opportunity, and I hope that this has been helpful to people.
I'm sure it has. And I mean, I'd recommend any of our viewers to definitely go out and read Paul's book. I mean, I've probably read all of them, and it's so insightful. It gives you a broader perspective on life, precisely what we're trying to do at WorldView, exploring everyone's perspectives. I mean, you couldn't broaden your worldview more with Paul's books. But to our viewers, if you've made it this far, please consider liking this video, sharing it as widely as possible, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.
Thanks, Donald.